Right, so Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby has resigned, and as an Anglican myself, I'd just like to say, not before time. He didn't resign because of the abuse in the church, detailed even by the most pro-establishment of news outlets. You certainly can't say the mainstream media aren't covering this one in their own way. But where they'll say this resignation came in light of abuse allegations, that really isn't the case at all. Because if it was, he would have gone years ago. Regarding the most recent allegations, however, the moment a cover-up was exposed, he didn't resign then either. In fact, he came out and said he was going to stay. Now, the only explanation for Welby resigning really is that he's been forced out by the establishment. Goodness knows Welby has always been an establishment figure himself, more so than any other archbishop I care to think of, in my view. But he's now become too much of a liability to be able to stay in post, and someone, somewhere, somehow, has convinced him not to stay, but to go. That has certainly come from survivors of the abuse, but also within the establishment community in itself, and that may well include my own church. But it's his departure more than the reasons for it that have prompted this video, because as he departed, he apparently made mention of having reported the most recent abuse in the church allegation relating to this man, John Smith, to the Metropolitan Police in 2013. And given the scale of the abuse involved here, and that this apparently came from the Archbishop himself, is it at all feasible that this didn't cross the desk of the Crown Prosecution Service? And if so, did the then Director of Public Prosecutions know about it? Would you care to have a guess who that was at the time? Right, so Justin Welby has finally opted to resign, seemingly having come under pressure to do so, and frankly it was the only way to send him on his way, as there is actually no mechanism to sack the head of the Church of England. According to my good friend and historian Dr. Louise Raw, in theory the King could do it, but with the royals hardly squeaky clean of scandals themselves, the optics pretty much reveal a clear issue of democracy here, especially since the Archbishop can sit in the House of Lords and can therefore partake in the making of laws himself. Mother of all parliaments, my backside, and all of that. For reasons that should be obvious in making any video content that will succeed in passing muster of censorship on certain social media platforms, I am not going into the details of the abuse allegations, though I will cover the backstory in a moment. Frankly, I don't feel the need to do more than that. There's plenty of sources, both mainstream and independent, have detailed these in all the gory and gut-wrenching detail. The mainstream presumably feeling safe in putting the boot into an establishment figure now that they are already on the way out, but such does it go to show they can do journalism when they are seemingly allowed to. The story does, however, centre around this being I hesitate to describe such a monster as a man, John Smith, who was central to the recently published Makin report, an independent review into the Church of England's handling of allegations of abuse in relation to him. An entirely independent review led by Keith Makin, hence the name, devoted to investigating the Church's handling of these accusations, and the Church, and notably Welby, have been found wanting, to the point Welby has seemingly been forced out, after initially saying he's staying in post, when he soon changed his tune. Makin himself has said of the review, according to the Church of England's own website, which also has a link to the full Makin report, the abuse at the hands of John Smith was prolific and abhorrent. Words cannot adequately describe the horror of what transpired. Many of the victims who took the brave decision to speak to us about what they experienced have carried this abuse silently for more than 40 years. Despite the efforts of some individuals to bring the abuse to the attention of authorities, the responses by the Church of England and others were wholly ineffective and amounted to a cover-up. The Church and its associated organisations must learn from this review and implement robust safeguarding procedures across their organisations that are governed independently. This has been a long process, but a necessary one, to uncover the extent of John Smith's despicable behaviour and how the Church reacted to it. I would like to sincerely thank the victims for their courage, grace and dignity, and I would like to remind everyone reporting on this review about their right to anonymity and privacy. And I wholeheartedly agree with their right to anonymity and privacy. By way of a brief background of this story, just for context, Smith used to run Christian summer camps for boys, such as where the abuse he carried out took place, and Welby allegedly had attended these camps, knew Smith, and according to the Makin report had had grave conversations about him, apparently having been overheard being warned about him. This was back in the 1980s. Well, Smith got found out and fled the country to Zimbabwe, and by 2012, the year before Welby became Archbishop of Canterbury, a victim had come forward, reported Smith, and Welby apparently did not notify the police at that time, nor anyone in Zimbabwe, even though Smith was still alive and was back to running Christian summer camps out there. Welby claims to have made a complaint to the Metropolitan Police in 2013 about him. Welby became Archbishop in March of that year, having been nominated to the post the month before. More on that in a moment, though. Nothing came of that, though, and Welby, it seemed, never followed it up. Or did anything come of it? We don't actually know. Smith died in 2018. He escaped justice for his crimes, and that in no small part falls on the Church of England. And now we have Welby resigning as a result of the independent investigation into all of this, and his own apparent role, though there is no suggesting he was ever involved in any abuse himself, it should be noted. Functionally, he has resigned because he's been pressured to do so, following accusations that he failed to act appropriately, which could have stopped a depraved serial predator in his tracks. It always strikes me as putting church before what is right and just and good and moral whenever these cases come up. And if that is the sort of cleric you are, then you're in the wrong job. And for that reason, I'm glad Welby has finally gone. Where Welby may have been warned about Smith in the 1980s, he was also warned after becoming Archbishop about the decades of abuse Smith was apparently guilty of in detail by the Bishop of Ely's safeguarding advisor. Smith himself wasn't a cleric, incidentally. He was a lawyer. He just led these camps as an evangelist and was allowed to do so despite what was apparently already known about him by the church and by Welby. From 2013, it seems certainly, but going back to the 1980s, so the Makin report seems to agree on as well. Welby claimed he had no awareness of these events in the Makin report, however. Denied knowledge before 2013, but the report has decided it is unlikely he had no awareness or had no suspicion of the abuse prior to 2013. That is their wording of it. So the report appears to claim Welby knew of Smith and what he was doing on the balance of probabilities, also the report's wording, as that report puts it, before he became Archbishop. The claim that Welby told the Met Police about Smith in 2013, however, raises more questions, though, that absolutely need answering. Why did they not investigate if this is the case? Or if they did, why did they not follow through with the sheer weight of allegations against this guy? Because there was a lot. This all very much comes down to if Welby genuinely made a report to the police. That is the first thing that we need an answer to. We only have his word for that at this point. Because if he did, it does seem very unlikely that he, the Archbishop of Canterbury, for heaven's sake, would be ignored by the police when coming forward with abuse allegations happening in his church and going back decades. In a matter this high profile, it is equally unthinkable in which case that the Met Police would not have involved the Crown Prosecution Service, especially since Smith was himself a lawyer. So what was their role here, if any, if the report was even made by Welby? But if it was, then questions need to be put to the Director of Public Prosecutions in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service at that time, if there was any involvement by the CPS. And at the time Welby became Archbishop in March of 2013, if we take the Makin report's view that Welby was informed by the safeguarding advisor of the Bishop of Ely just after he took that post, then the DPP at that time was definitely a certain Keir Starmer. Where Welby took up his post in 2013, March, Starmer's time at the CPS ended that same year, but not until November. So this one, if this complaint was ever made to the Met, and if it was ever referred to the CPS in turn, would have happened on his watch. One of the biggest abuse scandals to ever hit the Church of England. And with other scandals already known to have happened and seemingly nothing done about them on Starmer's watch at the CPS before, and we all know a few of them, don't we? It isn't exactly a surprise that a connection has been made here. Now, obviously, this depends on whether or not Welby really made a complaint to the Met in 2013. If he did, though, first point of contact, questions need to be asked of the Met as to whether that is genuine and truthful and whether a complaint was made to them, and why seemingly nothing was done thereafter. If they point to the CPS next, well, this scandal that's just toppled an Archbishop of Canterbury could it take down a Prime Minister if all roads end up leading to him too, in turn? Victims of this abuse deserve to know what happened there. Deserve to hear from the Met Police, at minimum, if such a complaint was made, and take things from there. We all do. Starmer, meanwhile, appears to be getting away in the mainstream media, at least with the fact he's appointed as a national security advisor, a man who had a role in helping a dictator escape the UK and escape justice and extradition to another country. It should be a huge scandal, but you've probably heard nothing about it. But then that's why you're here on this channel, and I've got this far into this video, and if you care to stick around and watch something else, well, I'm not going to stop you, so get the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.